Here's what nobody tells you about Formula One. For every Verstappen who delivers on their promise, there are dozens of drivers who prove talent is just the entry fee to a very expensive disappointment. GP2 kings, famous surnames, pay drivers, and scandal. Every one of them had a moment that turned into a car crash. The common thread isn't lack of speed, it's something far more brutal about how F1 actually works. Starting with the most dangerous label any young driver can receive, the next Senna curse. Being called the next Senna is basically F1's version of getting cursed by a witch. It sounds amazing until your career implodes spectacularly, and everyone pretends they never said anything. John Magnussen arrived in F1 with credentials that made team bosses drool. This guy demolished British F3 in 1994, winning 14 out of 18 races and making it look so easy that McLaren basically started planning his statue before he'd even sat in their car. The domination wasn't just impressive, it was absolutely brutal. His competitors looked like they were driving backwards while Magnussen was operating on a completely different level. But here's where it gets painful. Jackie Stewart himself called Magnussen the most talented young driver to emerge since Ayrton Senna. When a three-time world champion starts throwing around Senna comparisons, you know the universe is about to deliver a cosmic punchline. The brutal reality hit F1 like a freight train made of disappointment. Magnussen managed exactly one championship point in 25 entries, proving that sometimes talent scouts have the same accuracy as a broken GPS. 1 point. In 25 races. That's not a career, that's a statistical error with a racing license. The contrast is so stark it's almost comedic. Absolute domination in Junior Series followed by complete invisibility in F1, like going from rock star to roadie overnight, except the roadie keeps tripping over the cables. Magnussen's story proves that being labeled the next anyone in F1 is basically a death sentence. The sport has this twisted ability to take the most promising talent and turn them into cautionary tales. Hype becomes this psychological weight that crushes confidence faster than a Monaco barrier. But at least Magnussen got crushed by expectations alone. Some drivers get the double punishment of impossible hype combined with absolutely terrible machinery. McLaren's dream crusher. Stoffel Van Dorn walked straight into that nightmare scenario. This wasn't some borderline talent getting a lucky break. Van Dorn didn't just win GP2 in 2015, he absolutely annihilated it with 7 wins and a championship margin so massive it made his competitors look like they were driving backwards through molasses. We're talking about pure domination that had team principals fighting each other with briefcases to sign this guy. But here's where McLaren's genius really shines through. They handed him the keys to what they promised was a Formula One car, but what they actually gave him was a rolling advertisement for why Honda should stick to making lawnmowers and leave motorsport to people who understand that engines are supposed to make cars go forward. The Honda-era McLaren was so catastrophically slow that safety cars were genuinely faster during race conditions. Every race weekend became a 3-day exercise in public humiliation for everyone involved, with Van Dorn trapped inside this mechanical disaster like a talented pilot, flying a paper airplane in a hurricane. The qualifying battles against Fernando Alonso became particularly brutal, with his 2-time world champion teammate out-qualifying him badly in 2017 alone. The numbers tell the whole tragic story. Van Dorn scraped together just 26 points in 42 Grands Prix and never saw a podium, while Alonso in the same garbage car proved that even legends can't polish a mechanical turd into something remotely competitive. The cruel irony is that Van Dorn's talent was being held hostage by machinery that made go-karts look sophisticated. His speed meant absolutely nothing when his car was actively working against the basic laws of physics, turning every qualifying session into an exercise in damage limitation rather than actual racing. After escaping McLaren's torture chamber, Van Dorn found his way to Formula E and promptly won the World Championship, proving the talent was real, but the opportunity was completely rotten. His story perfectly illustrates how F1 can take a proven champion and turn them into a footnote simply by giving them the wrong equipment at the worst possible time. But at least Van Dorn's career died from mechanical failure. Some drivers managed to destroy themselves through pure chaos, turning raw speed into expensive fireworks displays that make everyone question whether talent is worth the insurance premiums. Crashtor's chaos. Pastor Maldonado had the unique ability to turn Venezuelan oil money into carbon fiber confetti faster than any driver in F1 history. And honestly, watching it happen was like witnessing a very expensive form of performance art. This guy arrived as the 2010 GP2 champion with enough PDVSA backing to make team principals forget basic math and enough raw speed to make them ignore the warning signs flashing like Christmas lights. The sponsorship money didn't just help him secure a seat with Williams, it kept him there despite the chaos that followed. Teams need funding to survive, and Maldonado's backers were writing checks that made his crash repair bills look like like pocket change. His 2012 Spanish Grand Prix win looked like the beginning of something special, proving he had genuine pace to beat Sebastian Vettel and Fernando Alonso on their day. For about 5 minutes, it seemed like we'd found another legitimate talent who could mix it with the big boys when everything came together perfectly. But here's where things get absolutely wild. Maldonado's definition of racing incident was so ridiculously broad, it could have included accidentally driving through a shopping mall. The man had a gift for finding new and creative ways to make contact with barriers, other cars, and occasionally thin air. Across 95 starts, he managed 1 win and 76 points while creating enough crashes to fund a small aircraft carrier. Fans couldn't decide whether to laugh or cry, so they just started calling him Crashtor and treated every race weekend like a betting game on what he'd hit next. His career became this fascinating study in how pure speed without self-control is like giving a toddler a flamethrower. Technically impressive when it works, but absolutely terrifying for everyone involved because you never know when everything's going to explode. The Spanish Grand Prix win remains both his career peak and ultimate punchline. It's proof that he genuinely had the ability to win races when the stars aligned, but it's also a brutal reminder that one good day doesn't make a career when you spend the other 94 race weekends turning perfectly good race cars into abstract art installations. But Maldonado's story raises an uncomfortable question about modern F1. What happens when the money is real, the speed is genuine, but the results exist in some weird middle ground that nobody knows how to judge? Pay driver paradox. Lance Stroll exists in that weird quantum state where he's simultaneously underrated and overpaid, which is basically F1's version of Schrodinger's driver. You can't figure out if he's decent or terrible until you actually look at the context, and even then the answer changes depending on your perspective. Stroll burst onto the scene in 2017 with a podium in his rookie year and that controversial pole position at Monza, immediately triggering the daddy's money alarm bells across the paddock. The timing couldn't have been worse for his reputation because everyone was looking for reasons to dismiss him as just another rich kid playing dress-up with racing cars. But here's where the math gets brutal and complicated. 3 podiums across more than 150 Grands Prix sounds absolutely terrible until you realize he's spent most of his career driving mid-pack machinery that makes podiums about as likely as finding unicorns grazing in your backyard. His career points total tells a story that sits uncomfortably between legitimate talent hamstrung by circumstances and billionaire's son playing very expensive dress-up. The numbers don't lie, but they don't tell the whole truth either, which makes judging his actual ability like trying to solve a puzzle with half the pieces missing. Look, Stroll has shown genuine flashes of speed when everything comes together, but those moments get buried under the narrative that his seat was bought rather than earned, creating a perception problem that follows him around like a bad smell at every single race weekend. Team politics and constantly shifting car philosophies have consistently put him in positions where success becomes nearly impossible. Racing Point became Aston Martin, the car got slower, the expectations stayed high, and suddenly, judging whether criticism is fair or just lazy analysis becomes genuinely difficult. Stroll's career perfectly embodies the modern F1 paradox, where money talks louder than speed, but speed without the right platform becomes meaningless anyway. You can have all the talent in the world, but if your car is garbage, nobody remembers your skill. He's living proof that in F1, your bank account can get you a seat, but it can't buy you respect. That still has to be earned on track, one lap at a time, regardless of how much your father paid for the privilege. But what if the money runs out and the performance pressure becomes impossible? Sometimes the fastest way to destroy a career is to give someone exactly what they think they want. Formula E refugee crisis. Nyck de Vries achieved what might be F1's most spectacular career implosion, going from hero to zero so quickly that physicists are still trying to figure out how it's possible. We're talking about a speed of collapse that makes black holes look sluggish. This guy arrived with a Formula E World Championship and that legendary Monza performance where he scored points on debut for Williams, making everyone think AlphaTauri had found their next star. The 2022 Italian Grand Prix was supposed to be his calling card, proving he could handle F1 machinery with minimal preparation and still deliver results when it mattered. But then reality hit like a freight train, made of disappointment and broken dreams. 0 points across roughly 10 Grands Prix with AlphaTauri, turning what should have been a dream debut season into a very public execution broadcast to millions of viewers every other weekend. His teammate Yuki Tsunoda outqualified him 9 times out of 10 and actually managed to score points while driving the same car. When your teammate is making the machinery work and you're not, the excuses start running thin pretty quickly, regardless of how garbage the AT04 actually was. The brutal irony is that de Vries had already proven his talent in Formula E, winning the championship and showing genuine racecraft under pressure. But F1's unforgiving environment turned his championship credentials into meaningless paper that wouldn't even qualify as decent toilet tissue. After his abrupt departure, de Vries returned to Formula E, which has basically become F1's rehabilitation center, where drivers can rebuild their careers after the main series chews them up and spits them out like expired gum. His story proves that sometimes the fastest way out of F1 is also the smartest, especially when other series actually appreciate your talent instead of destroying it for entertainment purposes. But de Vries wasn't the only victim of a system designed to break promising drivers. Some teams have turned destroying young talent into an actual business model, treating future champions like disposable products with expiration dates. Red Bull's mistakes. Red Bull's junior program has perfected the art of taking promising talent and putting them through a meat grinder operated by impatient executives with the attention span of goldfish on energy drinks. Take Jaime Alguersuari, who became F1's youngest driver at 19 when Red Bull threw him into the 2009 Hungarian Grand Prix with zero testing time. That's like handing car keys to a teenager and saying good luck, except the car costs millions and the whole world is watching you crash it. Alguersuari actually managed 31 points across 46 races and outperformed his teammate Sebastian Buemi in 2011 with 7 top 10 finishes. Then Red Bull dropped him anyway at the end of the season. He later said, "I still do not understand how it could have happened," which perfectly captures the bewilderment of watching your career get executed for no logical reason. Daniil Kvyat's story is even more brutal. He earned a podium at the 2015 Chinese Grand Prix, proving he belonged at Red Bull racing level. But after some aggressive moves in 2016, particularly incidents with Sebastian Vettel at the Russian Grand Prix, Red Bull demoted him back to Toro Rosso mid-season to make room for Max Verstappen. Christian Horner's comment about Verstappen being an outstanding young talent was basically a public execution disguised as a compliment. That's like your boss praising your replacement while you're still sitting at your desk packing your stuff. The timing was ruthless. Kvyat hadn't even recovered from being sent back to Toro Rosso when they dropped him completely from F1, showing how Red Bull treats drivers like expired products when the next shiny object appears. Both stories prove that Red Bull's talent factory operates on pure immediacy bias, where speed alone isn't enough when team politics and impatience decide who stays and who becomes a cautionary tale. Their experiences show how even F1's most successful junior program can simultaneously create champions and destroy careers, often in the same press conference. But at least these drivers had their own names to rebuild with. Some drivers carry family legacies that make starting over almost impossible. Family name curse. Bruno Senna carried the most famous surname in motorsport while driving cars that belonged in a museum of mechanical failures rather than on an F1 grid, which is basically the cruelest joke the universe could play on anyone. Being Ayrton's nephew should have been a blessing, but in F1, famous names are like cursed jewelry. They look impressive until they start ruining your life in spectacular ways, turning every race weekend into a comparison exercise nobody asked for. The weight of the Senna name became crushing when Bruno joined HRT in 2010. Their car was underfunded and slow, making 0 points across 18 races inevitable rather than surprising. Every single race weekend turned into painful comparison exercises against his uncle, who basically rewrote what greatness looked like in Formula One. The impossible standard set by Ayrton meant that anything less than perfection felt like failure, and nobody can match that legacy. His move to Williams in 2012 offered genuine hope. That 6th-place finish at the Malaysian Grand Prix showed glimpses of the family talent, proving he had legitimate speed when given machinery that wasn't actively working against the laws of physics. But even moments of brilliance got overshadowed by the constant weight of expectations. After escaping F1's brutal spotlight, Senna found success in endurance racing, including a podium at Le Mans, proving that sometimes the best way to honor a family legacy is to write your own story elsewhere. His journey shows how F1's obsession with heritage can become a prison, where famous names become anchors rather than wings. The cruel reality is that Bruno had real talent, but carrying the Senna surname in F1 is like trying to be funny after someone tells the perfect joke. The pressure of living up to the most revered name in motorsport proved overwhelming, turning what should have been an advantage into psychological torture, broadcast to millions. But family names aren't the only way F1 destroys promising careers. Sometimes the sport takes drivers with perfect credentials and academy backing, then teaches teaches them the harshest lesson of all: academy failures. Esteban Gutierrez and Antonio Giovinazzi represent two generations of drivers who discovered that talent academies don't guarantee anything except expensive disappointment when F1 decides your credentials mean absolutely nothing. Gutierrez won the GP2 series in 2010 after dominating Formula BMW Americas, arriving with all the right boxes ticked and expectations running high. But he scored just 6 points across his F1 seasons with Sauber and Haas, with his best result being 7th place at Japan that felt more like a participation trophy than actual success. Giovinazzi had the Ferrari Driver Academy treating him like their golden child after finishing second in GP2, but he totaled just 21 points in 62 starts for Alfa Romeo before they decided they'd seen enough disappointment for one lifetime and showed him the door. The brutal reality isn't about lack of speed, because both drivers had proven their talent in lower series where they actually won races and championships. This is about F1 seats being scarcer than hen's teeth and sponsorship dollars often mattering more than stopwatch times when teams are making decisions. Their careers became case studies in how the corridor from potential to podium gets blocked by team budgets, political maneuvering, and the harsh mathematics of a sport where 20 seats serve hundreds of hopeful drivers with equally impressive junior records. The academy system promises development and opportunity, but for drivers like these, it became a conveyor belt toward disappointment where investment in talent doesn't guarantee return on track. Ferrari backed Giovinazzi through their prestigious program, but even that support couldn't overcome inconsistent performance when it mattered. Both stories prove that academy backing is just another form of expensive hope that doesn't always translate into actual success. Their experiences show that in modern F1, being fast enough isn't the same as being lucky enough, and talent without perfect timing is just another form of expensive education. But at least these drivers failed through circumstances beyond their control. Some careers get destroyed by choices so spectacularly stupid that they make every other mistake look like minor paperwork errors. Crashgate catastrophe. Nelson Piquet Jr. was involved in one strategic decision that obliterated a career faster than anyone thought possible in Formula One. This guy had shown genuine podium potential with a second-place finish at the German Grand Prix in 2008, carrying his father's 3-time world champion legacy and looking destined for a solid F1 career. Brazil was watching, F1 was paying attention, and everything seemed to be falling into place until Singapore 2008, when he made a choice that would redefine the concept of career suicide. The Crashgate scandal was a premeditated act that destroyed the sport's fundamental integrity. Piquet Jr. was instructed to deliberately crash on lap 14 to bring out a safety car and hand Fernando Alonso a strategic win. This wasn't just cheating, it was calculated race fixing orchestrated by team principal Flavio Briatore and engineer Pat Simons. What makes it even more painful is that this wasn't a split-second racing decision gone wrong under pressure. This was a planned conspiracy that destroyed not just his career, but his entire reputation in motorsport forever. The fallout was swift and merciless. The FIA investigation confirmed everything, leading to severe sanctions for Renault personnel. Briatore received a lifetime ban from FIA-sanctioned events, while Simons was initially banned for 5 years. Piquet Jr. was sacked from Renault and effectively blacklisted from Formula One. 28 races, 19 points, 1 podium, and a career ended by a scandal that turned his name into a cautionary tale. Alonso had outqualified him 16 times to 2 that season, but instead of working harder, Piquet chose the nuclear option that made him motorsport's most infamous pariah. His story serves as the ultimate reminder that talent means absolutely nothing when your judgment leads to compromising the sport's integrity. While F1 can forgive crashes, penalties, and even terrible performances, it never forgives drivers who participate in race-fixing conspiracies. But Crashgate proves that sometimes the most spectacular career destruction comes from deliberate choices. Other drivers get trapped in situations where failure becomes inevitable through no fault of their own, where timing and circumstances conspire against even genuine talent. Toro Rosso trap. Jean-Eric Vergne discovered that being Daniel Ricciardo's teammate at Toro Rosso was career suicide disguised as opportunity, where genuine talent gets overshadowed by a future race winner sitting 3 feet away in the same garage. Vergne had legitimate speed and racecraft when he arrived at Toro Rosso, showing flashes of brilliance in qualifying and demonstrating solid race pace that proved he belonged in Formula One. But he made the fatal mistake of arriving just as Ricciardo was establishing himself as one of the sport's brightest rising stars. The timing couldn't have been worse for building a reputation. Every qualifying session became a direct comparison. Every race result got measured against the guy who would eventually win multiple Grands Prix and become Red Bull Racing's golden boy. Being consistently outshone by a teammate destined for greatness creates a perception problem that's almost impossible to overcome. Helmut Marko's ruthless management style turned the Toro Rosso environment into a high-pressure elimination game where immediate results mattered more than development potential. Vernier's occasional stellar performances couldn't overcome the perception that Ricciardo was simply the better bet for future success. His F1 career became a masterclass in how teammate dynamics can define your reputation more than your actual speed. The Red Bull Junior program operates like a talent elimination contest, where being good isn't enough when your garage neighbor is great and the team bosses are taking notes about who deserves the next promotion. The cruel irony is that Vernier's talent was completely real. After escaping Formula 1, he found his way to Formula E and became a two-time world champion, proving conclusively that he had the skills to compete at the highest level of motorsport when given proper machinery and team support. But F1's unforgiving environment couldn't see past the comparison game, where every driver gets judged against their teammate first and the field second. Vernier's story perfectly illustrates how the sport's institutional structure can trap talented drivers in impossible situations, regardless of their actual ability. Sometimes the most brutal career destruction comes not from lack of talent, but from circumstances where talent alone isn't enough to overcome the economics and politics that really drive decision-making. Test driver trap. Kevin Korgis represents the cruel reality that F1 can recognize your talent, give you hope, and then slam the door in your face because spreadsheets matter more than speed. This Estonian driver dazzled in Renault's development ladder after absolutely demolishing the Formula Renault 2.0 Euro Cup in 2010, with 4 wins and a championship that put him ahead of future F1 stars like Daniel Kvyat and Carlos Sainz Jr. The guy was 17 years old and making seasoned competitors look like weekend warriors. Korgis earned himself a Lotus testing role at just 18, participating in Abu Dhabi tests and becoming their reserve driver. He was looking like he was one step away from achieving the F1 dream that drives every young racer to sacrifice everything for a shot at the big leagues. But having the speed to impress in testing means absolutely nothing when budget constraints and sponsor requirements turn driver selection into an accountant's decision rather than a sporting one. Lotus was facing financial difficulties and needed drivers who came with substantial backing, not just fast lap times and championship trophies. Korgis tested for Lotus, impressed with competitive times, but the team chose drivers with budgets. Classic example of F1, economics trumping raw speed. While he was posting solid lap times, the team selected drivers like Vitaly Petrov and Bruno Senna for race seats because they brought financial packages. He continued racing in GP3, even won at the Nürburgring and grabbed podiums, but finished 7th overall when he needed championship-level results to overcome his financial disadvantage. Without big-money sponsors, his F1 dream remained permanently out of reach. His story represents the hidden tragedy of F1. For every driver who makes it to the grid, there are dozens of equally talented drivers who get trapped in the development system without ever getting their shot at glory. The test driver trap proves that being fast enough to test doesn't guarantee being wealthy enough to race. Korgis's experience illustrates how the sport's financial realities create a system where talent alone isn't enough to break through. F1 rewards speed and money, but when you only have one of those ingredients, the dream becomes just another expensive lesson in how the sport really works. These 11 stories prove that talent is just the entry fee to F1's brutal elimination game. The harsh reality is that machines, timing, politics, and luck decide careers more than pure speed ever will. You can dominate junior series, carry famous surnames, or arrive with perfect credentials, but none of that matters when the sport's economics are working against you. Formula E has become a place where several drivers have rebuilt their careers after difficult F1 stints. Van Dorn won the Formula E championship, Vergne became a 2-time champion, and de Vries returned there to find success again. Sometimes the best way to prove your talent is to escape F1's dream-crushing machine entirely. For every Verstappen, there's a Magnussen. That's the brutal math of modern F1. Which failed prodigy do you think deserved a second chance, and why?